Chapter 1. They called her nothing. She was the smudge on the family portrait, the daughter no one dared to acknowledge. But even discarded seeds, buried deep, can grow forests that swallow thrones. The manor was built on pride. Every brick, every chandelier, every bloodline. It glittered not with warmth, but with legacy, a cold, unforgiving thing passed down from fathers to sons, generation to generation. And somewhere, hidden behind the embroidered curtains and the hush of servants, lived her, Selina, the illegitimate child of the Ainsworth dynasty. She wasn't listed in the family registry. No name on the birthday invitations, no portrait on the grand wall of heirs. She was the child of shame, born from a scandal no one dared speak of, a reminder of her father's single, reckless night with a woman who had since vanished into anonymity. The maids called her the attic ghost, the relatives called her that girl, and the matriarch, the Duchess of Ainsworth, only ever referred to her as it. Selina ate alone, slept alone, studied alone, if anyone bothered to educate her at all. She wasn't sent to prestigious schools like her half-siblings, nor given dresses that fit. Her room was once the governess's quarters, dull, drafty, and far from the gilded halls where laughter echoed. But what no one knew was this. Selina listened, behind every closed door, in the library at midnight, in the stables where secrets slipped easier than saddles. Selina soaked in every whispered strategy, every political alliance, every mistake the family made. While they believed she was too insignificant to notice, she wasn't planning revenge then. She didn't have the strength, not yet, but she remembered, and sometimes, on quiet nights, she'd look at her reflection in the cracked mirror and whisper not promises of vengeance, but questions. Who will I become when no one is watching? And then years passed, quietly, coldly, until the night everything changed. Chapter 2. The letter that was never meant to be opened. The rain fell that night, not like a whisper or a drizzle, but with the kind of fury that seemed to echo from the heavens themselves. It drummed against the rooftops of Ainsworth Manor, cascading down marble statues that never noticed her, soaking the roses she wasn't allowed to pick. And up in the attic, behind a rusted lock and stacks of forgotten trunks, Selina found it, a letter, unsealed, yellowed by time, tucked between an old ledger and a book of poems with her mother's initials on the first page. She hadn't meant to find it. She was just cleaning, trying to fix the leak above her cot, when the corner of the envelope fell to the floor like a fragile leaf in autumn. She picked it up, hands trembling not from cold, but from that strange instinct one gets when fate decides to whisper instead of shout. It was her father's handwriting, curved, cold, commanding, to be opened only in the event of my death. But her father was very much alive and cruel, and too busy arranging his son's engagement to notice that the child he'd cast aside still existed, still breathed under his roof like an invisible tenant. Selina hesitated. For the first time in years, fear bloomed in her chest like it used to when the Duchess's heels echoed toward her room. But this wasn't about fear. It was about truth. So she opened it. The letter was long, formal, written with the restraint of a man who couldn't allow himself to feel, only to control. But buried in its carefully worded lines was the tremor of something unexpected. Guilt. If this reaches you, Selina, I have already failed you more than once. I know what they say about you. I know how they treat you. I let it happen. You were born of a moment I never spoke of again, but you were never a mistake. The truth is, you are the only one of my children who carries the original Ainsworth bloodline through both mother and father. The others, their legitimacy is a matter of name, not heritage. Selina stopped breathing. The storm outside crashed, louder, as if it too could feel the shift. She read on. There is a second will, hidden in my private vault in the capital estate. If anything should ever happen to me, and you can prove your identity and right to succession, that vault and everything within it belongs to you. Yes, you were never meant to inherit, but perhaps fate has other plans. The room spun. She sat down on the floor, still clutching the paper like a lifeline and a curse all at once. All her life, she thought she was the outsider. Now, she realized she wasn't the unwanted one. She was the rightful one, the heir no one wanted to acknowledge. And suddenly, the rules of the world she knew no longer applied. The people who sneered at her were not made of stronger blood, just better lies. The brothers who mocked her bore less claim than she did. And the woman who banished her to silence might one day have to bow. But Selina didn't smile. Not yet, because truth, without power, was only poetry, and she was done living like a forgotten line in someone else's story. She folded the letter, tucked it inside her coat, and stood. The rain kept falling, but Selena was rising. Chapter 3. The fire beneath the portraits. There was a hallway in Ainsworth Manor no one ever spoke of, not because it was hidden, but because it was sacred. Generations of Ainsworths lined its walls in oil and gold leaf, their portraits looming in silence, eyes forever watching, judging, reminding. Selena had walked it 1,000 times, always with her eyes down, always in silence, but tonight, her gaze rose. She stood before the portrait of Lord Aldrin Ainsworth, the man she once called father. His image, larger than life, painted with the gravity of a ruler and the vanity of a god, stared out at her from a velvet canvas, as if daring her to speak the truth she now carried in her coat pocket. "You lied to them," she whispered, "and to yourself." The flickering gas lamps along the corridor caught the gold threads in the frames, casting ghostly glows across each ancestral face. The ancestors who never knew she existed, the empire that never imagined her name, but they would. Soon, Selena's hand brushed against the ring of keys she'd stolen, no, reclaimed from the old groundskeeper's study. One of them, he'd said in a drunken haze, was for the library's forbidden wing. A wing her stepmother had sealed years ago, claiming it held nothing but dust and scandal. Dust and scandal, exactly what she needed. The key turned with a soft click, the weight of decades shifting behind ancient hinges. The door creaked open, unveiling a chamber untouched by sunlight, where secrets slept in books wrapped in silk and locked chests bearing broken wax seals. "It was here," the past whispered. Loudest, she lit a single candle. Its flame shivered like her breath as she moved among relics of forgotten power, letters from foreign courts, journals bound in cracked leather, and ledgers that did not match the accounts her father had shown the world. And then behind a cracked mirror she found it, a second portrait, of her mother. Not the one they hung in the nursery, the polished painting of a woman with no name. This was raw, intimate, unfinished. Her mother's eyes burned with something deeper than beauty, rebellion, and pinned behind the frame was another letter. One written not to a noble court, nor to an heir, but to her. "If you find this, Selena, then you've already begun." "Good. I prayed they wouldn't break you. There are alliances in this house, invisible to the eye but older than any marriage. Servants who still remember what loyalty used to mean. Find them. Watch the ones who watch you. Trust only what you verify. And never, ever let them see your rage, because a storm never warns before it strikes." Selena pressed the paper to her chest. She did not cry, not tonight. Instead, she stepped back into the Hall of Ancestors, the fire of her candle now steady. She looked up at the portraits again. But this time, she didn't lower her head. She met their gaze, and in the silence of those painted judges, she felt it. The balance had begun to shift. Chapter 4. The shadow beneath the throneth halls of the imperial palace were colder than she remembered. After the ceremony, after the reluctant cheers, after the public acknowledgement that the so-called trash had inherited not just the empire, but its history and its burden, Lyra walked alone through the gilded corridors, the hem of her ceremonial robe brushing against marble older than her name. She should have felt triumphant. She felt watched. The empire's inner court was a game of masks, and behind every smile was a ledger of alliances, betrayals, and debts yet to be paid. Lyra, the girl who grew up in the dusty servants' wing, now sat at the apex of it all. But even from the highest throne, a dagger thrown from the shadows could still reach her heart. She knew that the council didn't trust her. Not really. They applauded because they had to. They bowed because she wore the crown. But their eyes lingered too long on her hands, as if waiting for her to drop something, to falter, to reveal she was still that illegitimate girl who once poured their tea. And worse than them was Lyra, her half-sister, the true daughter, the one raised to rule. Lyra had not attended the ceremony. That in itself was a declaration of war. Lyra found her in the North Wing garden that evening, surrounded by roses that never bloomed in the wild. Lyra wore mourning black, not for their father, who died months ago, but for the title she believed should have been hers. "You should leave while you still have the illusion of victory," Lyra said without turning. Her voice, always soft, was razor-edged. Lyra didn't flinch. "You grieve the crown more than you grieve our father." "I grieve the death of meritocracy," Lyra hissed. "You walk in here with peasant blood and expect to rule? On what foundation? Pity? I walk in here because I survived what you never even faced, Lyra replied. And I rule because I understand the people. Not just their taxes and titles but their silence, their hunger, their rage. Lyra turned then. Her beauty was flawless, imperial, but her eyes burned with disdain. Then rule them. But know this crown's way heavier when your head is borrowed. And with that, she swept away, leaving behind a silence far more dangerous than shouting. That night, Lyra summoned only one person. An old man with crooked shoulders and clearer eyes than most in court, Master Orin, her childhood tutor, secretly dismissed when her parentage had been discovered. You were right, she whispered. This place remembers every slight. He smiled faintly. And you, child, remember every bruise. That's why you'll outlast them. She leaned forward. Then help me remember how to rule with more than survival. I want to rebuild, not just reign. He bowed. Then let's begin. And in the shadows of a kingdom built on bloodlines and lies, the girl once mocked as garbage began to draft her empire not in ink, but in fire. Chapter 5. The price of a throne. Next morning arrived cloaked in fog, as if the empire itself was unsure whether to wake or to weep. Lyra stood at the high balcony overlooking the courtyard, where soldiers began their drills with practiced fervor and commoners waited at the palace gates for a glimpse of the girl-turned-empress. But her mind wasn't on ceremony. It was on strategy. She had worn the crown for less than 24 hours, yet already whispers stirred through the corridors like rats in the cellar. Quick, silent, and carrying poison. The council chamber. The air was thick with unspoken objections. Duke Harlan spoke first, his voice wrapped in civility but punctured with condescension. Your Majesty, the military budget requires urgent attention. Without seasoned oversight, reallocating funds could lead to instability. Translation: you are too new, too young, too common to know what you're doing. Lyra kept her voice measured. Instability arises not from change, but from stagnation. The soldiers on the eastern border haven't been paid in 3 months. I'm fixing that. Murmurs flared. Lord Viral scoffed under his breath. Lyra's allies, every one of them, she. Let them murmur. Let them underestimate. It would make their fall quieter. That evening, as twilight dipped the halls in soft gold, Lyra met with Master Orin again. They're testing you, he said, pouring her a cup of bitterroot tea. Testing your patience, your resolve, perhaps even your blood. I expected resistance, she said, but not erosion. He raised a brow. Erosion breaks mountains in silence. But you are not stone, child. You are flame. Let them chip at shadows while you set foundations. In the West Tower, Lyra convened her own meeting. A private dinner turned council of dissent. 10 nobles, 7 military officers, 1 former ambassador from the kingdom of Aerith. She's pushing peasants into power. Lord Viral spat. What's next? A stable boy as Minister of Trade? She's smart, Lyra admitted, and stubborn, but she's still an imposter. We don't need to attack her with swords. We can bury her in doubt. A general leaned forward. You mean ruin her reputation? No, Lyra whispered. We ruin her purpose. Make the people wonder why the crown picked her at all. Eyes gleamed across the table. And when she's weak, Lyra continued, we take what was always meant to be mine. Far below, Lyra walked alone through the old archives. Shelves stretched into darkness, filled with forgotten edicts and ancient treaties. But tucked beneath the dust, secrets lay waiting. She ran her fingers over a worn scroll, half-burned, sealed with the royal crest, her father's crest. She opened it slowly, breath stilling, and read words that changed everything she knew about her birth. Chapter 6. The blood of fire and ash scroll trembled in her hands as if it too remembered the moment it had been hidden away. The parchment crackled under her fingertips as Lyra read line after line, each word a dagger slicing through everything she thought she knew. Her mother had not been just a kitchen maid. She had once been a noblewoman in disguise. A political exile from the shattered House Caerwyn, cast out during the war, protected only by an old alliance with the late King Arden, Lyra's father. The scroll bore his seal, but it was not a decree. It was a confession. I named the girl, born of fire and ash, of Caerwyn and my blood, as my rightful heir if ever darkness takes me before her time. It had been dated 2 days before his fatal accident. Lyra stood frozen as silence enveloped her like burial cloth. So that was it. She wasn't an orphan by fate. She was a secret by design, a living threat to every faction that had profited from her father's death, a legacy buried in fear. She didn't sleep that night. The torchlight flickered against the cold stone walls as she walked the hallways alone, memories flooding back of being mocked for her silence, for her lack of place, for the mystery of her origin. But now, the silence was power, and her origin was revolution. Dawn. She summoned Master Orin and her new inner circle, three unlikely allies she had been watching closely: a seamstress turned spy, a former general stripped of rank, and a merchant's daughter with maps inked into her memory. She unrolled the scroll across the war table. "This is our proof," she said. "Not for the council, not yet, but for us, for the future." The general frowned. "You intend to move forward without legitimizing your claim?" Lyra's eyes burned. "I don't need their permission to be what I was born to become. Let them challenge it. I dare them." The merchant girl smiled. "Then let's give them something to fear." Meanwhile, in the western wing, Lyra received word of a theft from the royal archives. A single scroll, unlisted in any index, gone without a trace. She didn't sleep that night either, because something told her Lyra had just remembered who she was, and soon, so would the world. Chapter 7. The Empire remembers. Skies over. Caldrian turned dark before the storm arrived in Omen. Some whispered, of old blood rising. Others merely tightened their cloaks and hurried their steps. But in the shadows of palace halls and echoing council chambers, the wind had already changed. Lyra stood at the grand window of the throne room, watching the tempest roll in. The storm mirrored the unrest growing within her walls. Since the scroll's discovery, she'd become more than an empress by name. She was now heir by blood, Caerwyn flame, and ardent steel. But truth alone didn't bend empires. So she set it ablaze. It began with letters, delivered by hawks trained in secrecy. Her words reached distant allies and sleeping factions. To the north, she sent a broken seal to House Brine, the ancient enemy of House Viral but bound by honor to Caerwyn. To the south, gold. To the east, promises. And in the west, silence. She wanted Lyra to stew in uncertainty. Then came the speeches. Lyra rode through the capital in plain robes, no crown, no escort save for the old general by her side. In the rain-soaked plaza, where once she had been called a street rat and worse, she stood on a broken fountain and declared, "I was born in shadow, but not in shame. I carry the blood of a mother who endured exile, and a father who died trying to protect his kingdom from the vultures within. I am not your perfect queen. I am your mirror. I have suffered, I have bled, I have survived, and now I will lead." The plaza went still. Then someone cheered, another followed, and then the storm could not drown the roar of a people who saw themselves reflected in her fire. In the palace, chaos bloomed. Lyra stormed into the war chamber. "You let her speak?" she screamed at Lord Viral. "She's only strengthened the lower districts," Viral muttered, fingers trembling. "But the noble houses still loyal, still unsure." "Not for long." Lyra's eyes gleamed like a blade catching firelight. "We poison her victory before it ripens. We tarnish the name Caerwyn again, spread stories of madness in their bloodline, of betrayal, of illegitimacy. And if she counters, she won't. She's too busy chasing loyalty with sentiment." But Lyra was wrong. Lyra wasn't chasing sentiment. She was preparing a reckoning. That night, Lyra knelt at her mother's old grave, a simple stone marker in the back gardens of the palace. No one knew it existed, but she had always felt it somehow. She lit a single candle and whispered, "They tried to erase you, but I remember, and I'll make the world remember too." A wind rose behind her, fluttering her cloak. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Master Orin stepped forward, placing a folded parchment in her hand. "The Merchants Guild has pledged coin. The Eastern Riders' Passage, and the Rebel Lord of Dunhallow." He smiled. "He's offering his sword." Lyra stood. "Then it's time," she said. "Let them see what happens when a forgotten daughter rises not to beg but to reign." Chapter 8. The Throne That Burned Cold at Dawn. The imperial palace looked like a cathedral carved from fog and steel. The halls echoed not with fanfare, but with murmurs and certainty, dread. Every guard who passed through the marble corridors did so with a hand close to their sword. The banners had not yet changed, but the air itself whispered of a coming shift. Lyra entered the throne room not as a supplicant, nor as a girl seeking her place. She walked with the measured cadence of someone who had already decided the future and merely awaited the world to catch up. Her robes were no longer plain. They were the colors of Caerwyn, deep obsidian embroidered with silver flame. The sigil of her mother's house restored after 2 decades of silence. Upon her brow, a simple circlet, one not gifted by counsel nor forged by politics, but one she had found hidden among her mother's old belongings. A relic, a defiance, a promise. The nobles assembled in the chamber stiffened when she passed. Some turned away, some bowed too late, but none dared leave. She ascended the stairs and stood at the foot of the great throne once her father's, then Lyra's. Now it sat empty, a monument to ambition and betrayal. But Lyra made no move to sit. "I will not take this throne, because it is empty," she said, her voice filling the room like slow thunder. "I will not take it because I was wronged. I take it because I have earned it. With fire, with loss, and with blood not spilled in vain." A ripple passed through the chamber. The old Duke of Athol murmured to the lady beside him. The priest of light blinked as though seeing her truly for the first time, and in the far corner, cloaked in gold and fury, Lyra stepped forward. "So it's true," she said, smiling like a knife unsheathed. "You've cast your lot among thieves and rebels. Do you think banners make you queen?" "No," Lyra replied, her gaze steady, "but the truth does. And I have enough truth to tear down every lie you've built." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Then come take it. But know this, thrones are not won by words. They are won by war." "I know." Lyra turned to the assembled council. "Which is why I give you this last chance. Stand for the empire, not for the impostors who poisoned it." There was silence, and then the first man moved. The commander of the palace guard stepped forward, unsheathed his blade, and knelt. "I served your father," he said, "and I will serve his daughter." A second. Followed a merchant prince, then a southern warlord. Not all bent, not yet, but the tide had shifted. Lyra saw it. The mask of composure cracked. "You regret this," she spat, retreating toward the shadows. "No," Lyra said quietly. "You will." And with that, the storm Lyra had been building was no longer a warning. It was here. Chapter 9. Blood. In the Marbleith Palace, once a sanctuary of ritual and tradition, had become a battlefield of glances, whispers, and sharpened intentions. The floor of the Hall of Mirrors, where noble guests once danced under chandeliers, now echoed with boots, armor, and the breathless tension of approaching war. Lyra stood at its center, and no longer in borrowed robes or veils of humility. She wore midnight velvet trimmed in deep crimson, the colors of the first Caerwyn dynasty. Around her throat gleamed her mother's forgotten pendant, now reforged as a symbol of restoration and reckoning. At her side, Master Orin and General Thalen waited, not as counselors, but as sentinels. "Are they ready?" she asked without turning. Thalen nodded. "The gates are sealed. The lower districts have taken up arms. House Rowan holds the eastern bridge, and Lyra moves." Lyra exhaled slowly, the breath steadying her soul. "Then we do not wait. We remind them." Lyra's counterstrike was as swift as it was merciless. At high noon, smoke rose from the artisan quarter. Her first warning shot. Loyalist guards stormed the Temple of Truth, claiming heretical forgeries. In the noble courts, letters surfaced alleging that Lyra had poisoned her own mother to secure the bloodline. And by nightfall, Lord Viral had declared martial law over the western side of the capital. But the city did not tremble. It boiled. Where once the people watched from behind curtains, now they marched. They lit fires not out of rage, but memory of the daughter who once wept outside the palace gates, who now stood within its walls. That night, beneath a blood moon, Lyra convened her war council in the crypts of the old palace, a place even Lyra would not defile. "The coup has begun," Orin said gravely. "But it will not end in ink and whispers. It ends in steel." Thalen leaned over the table map. "We strike at dawn. Lyra's guards are thinnest in the northern bastion. If we take the bastion, we hold the crown tower. From there, she cannot command." Lyra traced her finger across the old stone, stopping at a red-marked courtyard. "And what of the innocent? The servants caught between walls?" "We evacuate where we can," Thalen answered. "But this will not be clean." Lyra met his gaze. "Then let it not be cruel." Hours later, alone in the Hall of Stars, a dome once built for celestial readings, now shrouded in dust, Lyra lit a single lantern. She needed no mirror. She had memorized every scar, every hollow in her cheek, every line carved by silence and survival. "Mother," she whispered, "this is no longer for justice alone. It is for memory, for every girl locked in kitchens while empires feast, for every truth buried under the weight of a title." The wind outside howled, and she did not flinch. A T first light, they moved, the streets turned red, not from blood alone but from the banners of Caerwyn reborn. Her allies marched, voices rising in unison, for the blood, for the fire, for the forgotten queen. In the bastion courtyard, Lyra faced Lyra at last. The queen regent wore silver armor, as cruel and elegant as the lies she'd built her reign upon. "You dare bring ruin to this house?" Lyra hissed. "No," Lyra replied, sword in hand, eyes alight. "I bring it truth." Their blades clashed, and in the heart of marble halls, the Empire remembered how thrones are truly earned, not by blood alone but by fire. Chapter 10. The Empress Rien's throne room had never known quiet like this. Snow dusted the window ledges. Morning light scattered across the floor of polished stone, soft and golden, as if the sun itself wished to bear witness. The banners had been changed, the crest of House Viral lowered, replaced by a sigil that had not graced these halls in 2 decades. A silver phoenix, rising, Lyra stood before the throne. She did not sit, not yet. Behind her, the new court assembled in Kale, a dozen lords and ladies who had once turned their backs on her, and now lowered their heads. She wore no crown, her hair was unbound, her fingers bore no rings. She stood simply, fully, as she was unadorned truth. "I will not pretend the past did not happen," she said, her voice echoing through the pillars. "I will not rewrite it to suit my pride. I was called nothing. I was made to believe I was less than ash. And yet here I stand, not because of their mercy, but in spite of it." A murmur passed through the gathered. She let it hang. "The Empire does not need another monarch in silks who dines while children starve," she continued. "It needs memory, fire, justice, and above all vision." Slowly, she turned and climbed the stairs. Every step was a heartbeat, every heartbeat a reckoning. When she reached the final stair, she paused, looking down at the throne, carved from obsidian and ivory, polished by the weight of centuries. It had broken better men, it had shattered gentler women, but it had never met her. She sat, and in that moment, Caldrian's long night ended. Outside, the bells rang not for morning, but for rebirth. The Empress reigned, and the girl they had called trash became the name they would etch into history. The end. Epilogue. Ashes and Ecosires passed, but the city never forgot the winter when fire were the face of a girl. Under Empress Lyra's reign, Caldrian bloomed not in conquest, but in restoration. The orphans once ignored were schooled in halls she rebuilt. The servants once scorned stood in senate robes. Old names fell from marble walls, replaced by deeds, not bloodlines. She never married, not because love never found her, but because power never again owned her. In the mirror hall, the glass remained shattered, left that way by her decree. "Let them see themselves broken," she said, "before they try to rule whole." But there was one piece of glass, preserved and framed, hanging by her throne, a shard that once reflected Lyra's face. Lyra kept it not out of spite, but as a reminder that power taken through cruelty would always cut its wielder first. And when she died old, respected, loved, her people wept not for an empress, but for the girl who rose from ashes and never forgot the burn. Final message. The lesson of Lyra Caerwyn was called trash. A stain, a whisper, a shadow. But the truth is, sometimes it is the forgotten child, unwanted, unloved, unseen, who carries the fiercest fire. Lyra did not win because she was chosen. She rose because she refused to disappear. This story is not just about revenge. It's about remembrance of your worth, your truth, your name. Even when the world throws you out with the ashes, let them mock. Let them cast you aside. Let them say you are not enough. Because one day, the same voices that called you nothing will tremble when they speak your name. And when you build your throne, build it from everything they said would break you. Then sit, not in pride but in power, in peace, in your own light. You are never trash. You are always fire, and fire remembers.